to self-nurturing. I think we all can agree that grief means a sense of loss of something that was very near and dear to us. And it isn't necessarily a person, it's quite often a person, a pet, but it can also be a job, it can also be a house, it can be something that we used to be able to do that for some reason we can't anymore, for any number of reasons. Quite often, it's when we've invested ourselves in something and then it dissolves or goes away for some reason. I remember that when I was teaching at TCC, I had a senior who liked to take classes. He wanted to keep his mind challenged, and he had been a professional man in his career, and now he was retired. Well, one day he came to me all excited because he was going to be a docent at Philbrook. And he really threw himself into this. He read all the materials they gave him. He did extra research. He asked me for extra information if I had anything on the arts and things. And he just was so happy. And about a month later, I don't know, time isn't always clear to me. He came to class and he was just drudging in. And I said, "What happened? Why, you seem so sad today?" And he says, "They let me go at Philbrook." Now, I was never clear on why, but the point here isn't why, it's the fact that it happened. He was so invested, he'd given his whole heart to this, and it needed grieving. He needed to grieve that it was no longer available to him. If you think about it, every experience that we have is gone as soon as we have it. But we don't go around mourning for yesterday, usually. Because, and why don't we? You know, yesterday's yesterday, and we just say, okay, now's now. We keep moving forward. What stops us? What, pulls us out of that? Quite often, it's when we know we can't recreate the experience, that it simultaneously becomes precious and unreachable. And I think that's what engenders the sense of loss. I can remember I had a movie camera for a short amount of time in 2008, and I took a few pictures of us opening presents. One of the most boring things you can do is take pictures of every year Christmas presents opening. I took a couple of pictures, and then my husband got sick. And it was like I had no moving pictures of him except after he was sick. And I thought, why didn't I take him when he was feeling great? Well, because he was there. I was only going to take pictures of people that weren't there all the time, or special occasions or something. I didn't go around the house taking movies of Leo.
Yeah.
And then when I knew he wasn't going to be around much longer, I'm taking pictures, moving pictures of a very sick man. And I thought that was so sad, but we take it for granted that people and things and pets and houses and jobs are going to be there until we're willing to let go of them. And that just doesn't always happen. So the fact that I wanted to share with you a poem I wrote back in 2015. I wanted to go on a self-guided spiritual retreat to Colorado. And so I stayed for 3 days in a cabin in the woods, so to speak, all by myself. And I would go hiking during the day, and I'd go into Estes Park for lunch or something, but I really was just being by myself. This was 5 years after Leo went home. And I wrote a couple of poems while I was there. And this one relates to today's topic. It's called The Empty Chair. The chosen place at the end of the table where my husband would sit to visit with me as I cooked dinner, to play cards, to sip coffee, to watch TV, even to read a book. That chair is empty now. My husband, a casualty of colon cancer. Today, stacks of papers and unread mail cover that place. A box of vitamins sits in his chair. When did I start erasing the memory of his presence at the table? When did it become too lonely to leave an open place that would not be used? The empty chair, a painful reminder that he was gone and would never sit there again. Shortly after my husband passed away, I was given some very wise words, and they were, all grief is attachment to form. All grief is attachment to form. And the goal is to live and love without attachment. To live and love without attachment. The Buddhists would say that we suffer in direct proportion to our degree of attachment. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, we've all lost people, we've lost pets, we've lost jobs, which ones did we have the hardest time letting go of? And which ones we could say, well, they lived a long life and they're in a better place and it's good that they're no longer suffering and all of that. I mean, you can see we've all had the choice of accepting what's so and of resisting what's so. And it's our choice. It's always our choice. Right after my husband, his body died of cancer, and I say it that way because we all know that nobody dies. The body becomes dysfunctional enough that it cannot support life, and we leave it here. But nobody dies. And there's no space, so nobody's gone. What is going on here is that we are identifying so strongly with the body that when somebody else drops their body, we feel that they are gone because we can no longer touch them. We can no longer pet our pet. And that's true. And it hurts. But that's all there is to us. And when you think about the fact that when we drop the body and we return to pure spirit, all that we can be and all that we are, that's a cause for celebration. Celebration. So when we can't, when we find that it's just too hard, I had the choice when my husband died to say he was in a very sick and painful body, and I rejoice that he's no longer suffering. And that made me very, very happy. Yeah. Or I could say, he's gone and now I'm alone and I don't have him in my life anymore. And that made me very, very sad. And that first week or two that he was gone, I was doing this. Yeah. Thank God, he's no longer suffering. Thank God. But I am. Sure. You know? And so that's tough. That's tough. So one of the things that we can ask ourselves, why are we staying attached? What was going on there? And Michael Beckwith, there are a number of ways to help us deal with the pain of loss, any loss, but particularly that of a person or a pet. And Michael Bethwick suggests, give yourself, everybody says this, right? Give yourself permission to grieve. Honor your feelings as well as your thoughts. Those folks that say, I'm not going to grieve about this, what is so is what's so, and then just try to go on, it's going to show up in your body. If we're talking about self-care this month, the best thing we can do is allow ourselves to feel what's there, acknowledge it, don't reinforce it. Don't say, I'm upset because. Any because is simply reinforcing your story around it. But say, I'm upset. It hurts. That's healthy. That's very healthy. But giving yourself a reason to prolong it, that may take a little bit of you want to let that one go. When we lose something precious, we have to give ourselves time to adjust. And that's different for everybody. Some people can get over a loss, a deep loss, within 6 months. Others take a year. I took 2 years. And and that doesn't mean you've stopped thinking about them. It's just you stop grieving. And there's a big difference between missing somebody and grieving. We got to give ourselves permission with no shoulds. I should be getting better. I should be getting over this. But there are things that can trap us. When we're lost somebody very special, does it feel like a betrayal to smile? Or do we feel that we have to look miserable all the time to show how much we love them? Some people fall into that trap. We can laugh. We can smile. We can go out and have a good time. They would want us to. We don't have to trap ourselves in that notion that the more I suffer, I show how much I love them. That isn't showing that at all. Because of how much we love them, we're thrilled for them, that they're one with themselves and the Spirit and God, and they're all that they can be and not trapped in a physical form anymore. Mm-hmm. A second thing that we can do, and I really thought this was so cool, and I'm sure many of you have thought of it, is to celebrate what that person meant to you, what they contributed to your life, and make a list. Do you know that the very act of making a list of everything they meant to you in your life, all the qualities that they brought to you, makes their presence real in now time? The energy hasn't gone away of all those beautiful qualities. So when we think about it and we rejoice in how much fun they were, or how creative they were, or how compassionate they were, or how forgiving they were, and we just kind of go, oh yeah, or a pet, it was always there. When I was sad, it would jump up on my lap, I know that in the beginning that feels sad for that first reason. We can't recreate it. But then when we start rejoicing it and are focusing on it, we're bringing them right there. We're bringing them right there with us now in spirit and energy. When we begin to see the depth of our grief as reflecting the holes that a loved one's spirit once filled, those holes go from being triggers of sadness and regret to altars of gratitude. I like that. Mm-hmm. To altars of gratitude. And as Winnie the Pooh, the great sage, said, how lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. Yeah. Mm. Isn't that lovely? Yeah. I like that. Okay, a third thing that Michael Beckwith suggested, and this one I hadn't thought about in as much detail as this, but it makes so much sense. Dedicate a practice or a project to the one you've lost. And an example of that came in this month's quotes. A woman who had lost her 8-year-old son, Ollie, he had died in 2019. To help her grieving, she went out and worked in her garden. And she worked in her garden, and she worked in her garden. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon she had all these vegetables and fruits. And she couldn't eat them all. And pretty soon she had a table on her front lawn and said, "Free veggies." And then she started making homemade breads and homemade jellies, putting that on her table. People were coming by all the time. And what she said, as this continued, I mean, this went on for a while, and what she said was, "It keeps Ollie's spirit of loving kindness alive." One of those beautiful qualities that she had listed, that she probably listed or thought about, was loving kindness. And so she wanted more of that in her life. And she came up with that project, and it honored him and it transformed her. So the fourth thing then is based on having them in your life. How can I now give my life new meaning? What did they teach me by example that I can include more of? Creativity, forgiveness, generosity, compassion. The Dalai Lama in his Book of Joy said, "The way through the sadness and grief that comes from great loss is to use it as motivation and generate a deeper sense of purpose." Now, a fifth thing is to recognize too, and this goes a little deeper, that if we're lonely after a pet dies or after a human dies or a friend dies, or even after we lose a job or whatever's happened to us that's so traumatic, we can fill in the holes, and we need to, with our own spirit. I think this is particularly true of a breakup. When you've been going with somebody for a while and then the whole thing breaks up, they're not dead, but they don't want to be with you anymore. That to fill in with their absence with more of your divine self, more of who you truly are, it's using the suffering to transform yourself into a greater, bigger, more spiritual, more compassionate, more of you, and not relying on other people to fill those holes. So it gives your life more meaning. And Michael Beckwith, when these things were mentioned to them and that suffering was actually a gift, he said, "You become in that loss worthy of the suffering when you use it for transformation." Right. We don't often think about needing to be worthy of suffering, but there's a reason we have suffering in our life. And it's to show us where we haven't, when we've allowed things out there to try to fill us up instead of coming from in here and filling the holes out there. So I want to end this talk with the second poem that I wrote when I was in Colorado. And this is called "The Beauty of an Empty Chair." A chair, an invitation, its arms offering to embrace anyone who sits in it, offering comfort, rest, and support. Two chairs suggest a conversation, a sharing, of opinions, of stories, of memories, of companionship. An empty chair is a stillness, waiting, open to whatever comes, willing to embrace and willing to set free, stable in its own being. Let me be like that empty chair.